Here, we've got a great event for you. My name's Mindy Hildebrandt, and I am the Director of Enrollment here at Science and Arts Academy. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker here this evening, Kathleen Nilles. Kathy currently serves as the Parent Services and Communication Manager for the National Association for Gifted Children. She is also the editor of Parenting for High Potential magazine, and she's the co-author of Success Strategies for Parenting Gifted Kids. And amongst all that, probably her most important job is mother to a gifted child of her own, now 19 years old. So Kathy has 14 years of experience in working with parents of gifted children, both personally and professionally. And I'm thrilled that she is here with us this evening to share more about understanding giftedness through the ages. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Kathy. Welcome.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be here. And what we are going to be doing is giving you a quick snapshot of giftedness through the various levels of childhood development. Basically, often we look at giftedness through the lens of characteristics and traits, and for this presentation I've mapped it out by age level simply because that's how I experience and many parents experience understanding their child as they develop. So real quick, NAGC's definition of giftedness is that children are gifted when their ability is significantly above the norm for their age. And giftedness isn't just academic. It can be in terms of intellectual giftedness, but it is also viewed in the creative realm, artistic realm, leadership realm, or specific academic fields such as language arts, math, or science. And because a person is identified as gifted in one area, they may be gifted in multiple domains, but that does not mean they necessarily have to be. And same with the academic area. Sometimes gifted children are strong in language arts and math and science, or one of them, or art, for example. On the slides, I've given you some things to read, some resources to look for. On this one, we have a document called "Is My Child Gifted" at NAGC, which I encourage you to search for through our website. One point I wanted to make, I make a couple of key points about giftedness before we get started. It's really important to think about focusing on the whole gifted child. Giftedness really extends beyond intellectual ability, and things we need, or areas of the person's development we need to focus on, are not only cognitive, but social, emotional, physical needs, and even spiritual needs. So NAGC and many of the thought leaders in gifted focus on all of these aspects of the gifted child, while we mostly talk about academic, social, emotional, and these other areas are also very important. So if you were to search for topics on the internet, you might look up the words whole gifted child or social emotional learning. And we have some tip sheets at NAGC. We have about 20 of them free on our website. And the one I would direct you to for this topic is Serving the Whole Gifted Child. One other point I wanted to make is that if you've met one gifted child, you've met one gifted child. No two gifted children look or act alike. Giftedness crosses all demographics, socioeconomic backgrounds, and often that's some areas that are, a lot of students actually are underserved because they don't perhaps live in communities where they have access to resources. So NAGC is embarking on an equity initiative this year, and really striving to ensure that gifted children from all backgrounds, all walks of life, all economic levels, all races, cultures, have the ability to be served, identified, and served. Common characteristics among gifted. There's some general, if you will, principles that I just want to mention. So while each child is unique, there are some common characteristics and traits among gifted, and those have been identified through research for the last 50, 60 years. Gifted traits and behaviors also extend through the lifespan. So it's not that you're a gifted child for a period of time, or that your IQ is above average for a limited time, gifted children become gifted adults. And maybe some of you are learning about yourself being gifted or know that you were gifted, and have now passed that along genetically to your children. As I mentioned, some characteristics may be more noticeable at various development stages as you become more in tune with their identity. And things that you might want to look up, again, for further information are gifted traits and characteristics, definitions of gifted, and we have a tip sheet on gifted, what we call Gifted 101 at NAGC. So let's go to the early years. I get calls all the time from parents who start recognizing traits in their children as early as 6 to 9 months. And the characteristics you might see in your baby would include unusual alertness in infancy. Some people talk about it as kind of the children's eyes light up. There's just something there that you might not see in another child. Also, they may progress quickly through developmental milestones. Like instead of crawling, they may start walking right away. Some children can count at a very young age, start reading at a very young age. They're rapid learners. They put thoughts together quickly. Another sign is as a toddler, they might use, words that adults might use, and they might have complex sentence structures. My son was an assimilator, and so he actually held back on his speaking until he could really put sentences together. And then as a toddler, he was speaking in very complicated, complex sentences and using word nuances that typical children might not use. Again, there's some search terms you could look up. There's a write-up at the Davidson Institute on extreme intelligence in very young children. I have an article from NAGC called Is My Toddler Gifted? And we have a tip sheet on early childhood for you. As the children progress in age through those early years, and now I'm talking through preschool, they solve problems, they like numbers and puzzles. Often they're self-taught. My son taught himself to read. I didn't even know, or we didn't even know he was able to read until he just started reading one day, reading street signs and retail store signs, etc. Often gifted children have an excellent memory where they can remember certain scenes or certain people that they've met maybe even a year or two ago, and what shirt they were wearing and what they were saying and what you were doing. They might have a long attention span where they're really concentrating on a certain interest for a very long time. And they learn things very quickly with very little practice. Now, some tips for you in terms of how to nurture that. Experts suggest that play and creativity and exposure to as much as possible at an early age through culture, arts, books, following their interest is essential. If they like dinosaurs, give them everything they want about dinosaurs, whether it's books or when museums open up, you can do that. But don't hold back. But then also, if you can expose them to as much as possible, talent development starts at a very young age, and it's not too soon to start, stoking those passions and seeing where your child has strengths. Go ahead, Monica, if you want to forward to the next slide. Often I get questioned about when to test the child, and experts suggest a child should be tested no sooner than age 5 or 6. So, I often will get a question, my son or daughter is 3, and where can I get them tested for giftedness? And the answer is really nowhere. The best thing to do is to just, you at home as the parent, to really stoke those interests, find the books. I suggest that parents keep records and, not a baby book per se, but almost a portfolio of what their child is doing. Grab your phone and take a picture, take a video of what you see and hear, jot things down, because eventually when you do have to advocate for them to either enter kindergarten perhaps early, or you do decide that you're going to get your child tested, you want to present some of that data to the psychologist and the schools. Often parents will get their child tested if they want to enter a special program like Science Arts Academy, for example, which is a private gifted school. And there are requirements for students to get into those types of programs, as well as enrichment programs that are targeted for gifted children. what I saw, or what some parents see, and sometimes you see it at a young age. Keep in mind, I kind of put these traits, if you will, into these buckets, but really they can happen at any point in time, early or young. So please don't take it as a, this window is when things need to happen. But often what will start happening is parents will see their children in the early elementary years have high sensitivities, meaning sometimes they're called overexcitabilities, where they're just kind of wired differently and operating at a higher level. They're very intense feelings and reactions. Sometimes they may have outbursts that might resemble what a toddler might be experiencing, and you think your child should be beyond that. Often they have sensory sensitivities to noise, scratchy fabrics, certain foods, lights, fluorescent lights. They have a sense of idealism and justice even at a very young age. And again, vivid imagination. One tip sheet I'd like to point to you is the asynchronous development one in the lower right corner. That talks about the issue related to gifted children often develop what we call asynchronously, or in different developmental patterns over their peers, because their brain is operating at such a high level. Often the social aspect of their development may be lagging, or they may be extremely talented or accelerated in math, but lagging in reading, or vice versa. So sometimes a gifted child who's age 7 or 8 could still behave functionally like a 5-year-old, or they could behave like a 12 or 13-year-old. So this is what we call asynchronous development. It's uneven, and sometimes that's hard for parents to navigate and manage, but it's completely normal for gifted children. They might also have difficulty connecting with peers. That is an issue for my family, where age mates, kids go through school with children of the same age, but they really need interest mates, people who understand them, have the same interests, really get their sense of humor, what have you. And in like first grade, kindergarten, they may start to find the work unchallenging, particularly if they aren't identified yet, or if the school district is not willing to differentiate. So I have a friend whose daughter in second grade was basically sent to the carpet to do more worksheets instead of moving her in a more deep direction or more challenging work. And this can create unmotivation, underachievement, anxiety, frustration. You might see, if your child is going through some of that road schoolwork, that they're angry. And so those could be some signals to you that your child needs more. Research shows that gifted children master concepts in 1 to 2 repetitions, believe it or not, versus most students, I think, are around 9. The research is like 8, 9, or 10, but that just shows you sometimes if your child has a worksheet that has 50 problems on it, they really don't need to demonstrate 50 problems worth of work to show mastery of a topic. There's also a tip sheet there on assessments for you to look up, because that talks about the testing that I mentioned. Middle school. Peer connections become really important during these years. I mean, they're important all the time, but as you know, as adolescents develop, they want to be accepted by their peers. Social media enters into the equation in many situations. Some adolescents will hide their giftedness to fit in. That's often with gifted girls, because they are sometimes more social, or want to be more involved in fads and current events and that kind of thing. And so sometimes gifted girls have been known to go dark, and so we need to keep our eye on them to make sure that in middle school that they are allowed to still that giftedness is cool, so to speak. Sometimes their personality and interests might not connect with other age mates. If they have an interest in a random subject that an adult typically might, that can be a turnoff. Sometimes, the older children, even younger ones, but, want to share what they know. They're not trying to be know-it-alls, but that can be a turnoff to other students. And academically, I mean, they could be very far ahead and you might not even know it. Many middle schoolers are ready for high school or college level material. And so, the issue is our standardized tests have ceilings. So in the search area, I would encourage you to look up things like Talent Search, which are programs that are often run by universities like Northwestern, where you can have your child at a middle school age take the ACT or SAT, and they will show you where your child is and what their level is, so that you can then advocate with your school to make sure that they have those opportunities, or if not through school, through some other vehicle. Executive functioning can be challenging for some, and it becomes more difficult in middle school just because they're juggling more classes and more assignments and more complicated assignments like essays and writing. And so sometimes organizational supports are necessary, and this again is completely normal. My suggestions are not to compare your child to others, and if there is an interest that they have, to find mentors, coaches, adults, older children, even with common interests. There's a term in giftedness called twice exceptionality, which means they are gifted plus they have some sort of what we call a disability, whether it's a physical disability or a learning disability. They might have signs of autism or what used to be Asperger's. And so those kind of traits, might start showing themselves in a younger age, but they really start becoming more evident as the child progresses, like from 5th grade on, just because you're starting to see it in relation to their development versus their peers. My suggestion also is just to ensure their educational needs are met, with no ceilings for tests, providing appropriate challenge, really focusing on the 4 C's, which are communication, collaboration, creativity, and critical thinking, and to provide that so important social emotional support, because their hormones are raging, they're confused, and they need your support as parents. NAGC has a gifted and talented resource directory that's on our website, and there's a list of hundreds of services that are from organizations all over the country for enrichment or school alternatives, summer camps, you name it, and that might be a good resource for you. And the tip sheet I would suggest here is how to talk with your child about giftedness, because it is important to talk with them. Parents often ask, should I tell my kid they're gifted? My suggestion is yes, and the question is how you state it. So that tip sheet would provide you some help there. High school. Many of you might not be there yet, but having just had my son start college this year, I actually was frustrated a bit with the high school system, because right away, often they're pressured to start working toward college admission. And studies have shown that it's really important that we still focus on the cognitive, but the personal and the development of social self. And there's a model of giftedness in adolescence by Dixon and Moon that you might want to Google. But that kind of talks about all the pieces in terms of how to support your teenager. Again, my suggestion is to look for the rightness of fit. What's the right path for some might not be ready for appropriate for your child. My husband and I always ask each other every step of the way, every year, frankly, what's the right solution for our son, both academically, socially, and personally, for that time. Kids change over time, and again, I found that when my son was getting ready to go to high school, often students were applying to some of the very, top college prep schools, and the way those courses were set up and the environment in that school was just not going to be right for him. So don't hesitate to really think about what's right for your child, and to love them and accept them for who they are. And that, as a parent, it's really hard, because we all have dreams and hopes for our children, and we think things are going to go a certain way, and sometimes they don't. And that's just really important, to keep loving them and supporting them and accepting them for who they are. Self-advocacy is a really important thing to teach I put it here, but it could start as early as 3rd and 4th grade. As soon as a student is really ready to approach the teacher and say, if the material is not challenging enough, or they need additional support, or they would like to perhaps show mastery in a different way, that they start learning the tool of how to share with adults and others what they really need. And teaching that tool at a young age is really essential and will help them as they then travel through middle school and high school and later adulthood. And adulthood, I put this in here because while NAGC tends to focus on birth through college, studies have shown, as I said, that giftedness extends throughout the lifespan and really needs to be understood and nurtured in adulthood. Those traits and characteristics don't go away, really. They may be less intense as adults, but studies have shown that within families, typically, if one child is gifted, the likelihood is that all the children may be gifted, or at least more than one. And often the parents are also gifted, or if they don't think they're gifted, they weren't identified, but often there's a kind of an epiphany that happens with parents when they discover their children are gifted. They start saying, "Oh, hey, I think I was gifted too," and that's kind of an interesting journey. Sometimes there's grief that goes along with that, or frustration on the parents' side because they didn't have those opportunities, or maybe they did and they want the same for their child. So we just need to be aware of that in our family dynamics, and then to support adults as they can. My father, who's 84, I think is just figuring out that he's gifted, and I keep trying to share with him some tips, but there's the whole topic of giftedness related to introversion versus extroversion, and finding, again, peers as an adult. Often people can't connect because they can't find people with the same interests or who don't think like themselves. So throughout our lifespan, we need those peer connections. And there's an organization called Social Emotional Needs of the Gifted called SANG. I think their email or their website is sanggifted.org. And they really focus on all of the social emotional needs for gifted children and adults through the lifespan. Today, we're going to be raffling off a couple of books. This is the latest book from NAGC called Success Strategies for Parenting Gifted Kids. I highly recommend it. It's very reasonably priced. It's only $15 on Amazon. And basically, we took the top 220 articles that was in my magazine called Parenting for High Potential and framed it along the lines of early childhood creativity, educational programming needs, social emotional needs. So it kind of covers all the topics that parents care about with practical step-by-step advice, and also then reflection questions and resources. So that's the latest book on parenting from NAGC. And I encourage you to stay connected with me or NAGC. We have a lot of resources that are out there. Our web address is up in the left corner. We're on social media. And then I encourage you to subscribe to our weekly update, which is kind of a compilation of all news in gifted and talented across the country. And that just comes directly into your email box, and that's free. And a lot of resources on our website are free. All those tip sheets I shared with you. We have COVID resources. There's webinars there. There's if you go to YouTube, we have some webinars that we've held in the last year during COVID that would be helpful. But please stay in touch. And my email, I think, is on here somewhere. And you're welcome to reach out to me anytime. We hold conferences. We've got our conference coming up. We're doing a leadership and advocacy conference in March, which helps parents and educators learn how to advocate with our legislators. And then our annual conventions in the fall, which currently we're hoping will be in Denver. This past year, we had a virtual convention, very successful. But right now we're planning hopefully for an in-person convention so we can see everybody. And then there is a parent membership. And with that, it's a $59 membership, and you receive the monthly magazine, like I said, Parenting for High Potential, and then you receive teaching for high potential as well, plus have access to an online community and networks and that kind of thing. Here's my email address. Please feel free to reach out to me. I'd be happy to help you. It's been a delight meeting you virtually. I wish I could see you in person. And I'm here for you if you need anything or have any questions. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. Thank you so much, Kathy. This is a lot of information, a lot of fabulous information in a short amount of time, I know. So definitely, you know, Kathy is a fabulous resource. Don't hesitate. You know, we'll follow up with some of these resources, definitely. But she's a great resource. So feel free to reach out to her.